Schock, and I'm a registered dietitian with Sodexo here at University Hospitals.
I'm Anthony Verona. I'm the culinary director for UH with Sodexo. Welcome.
Did you know that November is American Diabetes Month? In both type 1 and type 2 diabetes, the body has difficulty making or using the hormone insulin, which is what helps us to use energy from food. According to the CDC, as of 2020, roughly 34.2 million Americans have diabetes, and over double that number have prediabetes. So throughout today's cooking demonstration, we're going to talk about some healthy eating tips to use and help you manage these conditions. So Chef Donnie, take it away.
All right. So what are we going to make today? First, we're going to make an almond cookie that's completely gluten-free, and it has about 5 ingredients in it, simple ingredients. Then we're going to make a spaghetti squash alla pomodoro. Fresh tomato sauce, some Parmesan cheese on top of roasted spaghetti squash. Great vegetarian, basically no fat, just some olive oil, low calorie, and definitely satisfying and filling. Some fresh basil, so a lot of good flavors, and fresh tomatoes as well. So let's get started with the almond cookie. So if you're gluten-free, this is for you. And you can make this cookie as extravagant or as not. I pre-made some right here. They're beautiful, they're moist. Juliana had one just earlier. They got a little bit of sweetness into it. And there's no fat in it either, right? No, there's no fat. There's no egg yolk. There's only egg whites. So what did I do? Here we go. First of all, almond flour. What a great ingredient. Almond flour is the most versatile. I don't know how walnuts don't do it, pistachios don't do it. Something about an almond, there's something in it. Today we had a party and we had a gluten-free guest, and might not have been the healthiest thing, but we had some tenderloin sliders, and what goes better with tenderloin than fried onions? Well, usually you fry them with flour. We coated them in almond flour, and I tell you, they were the best. Way better than flour. So anyhow, very versatile. I've been using a ton of almond flour lately in my travel and cooking. And today, it's a great avenue to use it. You gotta like almonds, right? So
they are higher in protein and lower in carbs too. So they can be a good option if you're just trying to be more mindful of carb intake as well.
So what did I do? I took 3 egg whites and some sugar, and I put it in here. And I whipped it up a little bit, nothing crazy, okay? Now I'm gonna take 3 cups of almond flour. So this is kind of the glue that's holding it together. Oh, one other thing, a little bit of almond extract. Boy, that goes a long way, so watch it. 3 cups of almond flour. At this point, I wanna get rid of the whisk because it'll just gum up the whisk. Okay, so 3 cups of almond flour. I already measured it out, but let's try it again. 1. It is a lot of almond flour, but that's what's holding this all together. And it's funny, fresh almonds, sliced almonds like I have here, are very almondy. Almond flour, for some reason, isn't as almondy. Is almondy a word? I don't know, but it's not has the taste of almonds. Obviously, it tastes like almonds, but. Okay, so I'm just mixing this together. Look what's going to happen here, okay? This is going to come together like a dough, which it is, a cookie dough, just like Toll House cookie dough or something like that. That almond just sucked up all that egg white and that little bit of sugar. It is a cookie, so we have to have a little bit of sugar in there. All right, now, there's my dough. No leavening, nothing. Look at this. To me, if you add chocolate chips in there, it would look like cookie dough. And it is cookie dough. So this is what we're going to do. Set that aside. I have a parchment lined paper here. I have my oven set at 360 degrees, 360 degrees. Now, move my almond flour. I have some chopped up almonds. I took slivered almonds with the skin on, and I just pulsed it in a food processor, and I got it kind of, rough, kind of little chunks, some not so, it doesn't really matter. So what I'm going to do is just take my hand, just make these into whatever sizes you want. Look at that little ball. I coat it in a little bit of that almond, and I'm going to place it here, okay? Anyhow, so I roll these. What else can you roll these in? Oh my gosh. Other nuts, macadamia nuts would be amazing. That's probably not the healthiest thing, but you could add a little bit more of some sort of sprinkles on top if you wanted it for kids. You know what else would be awesome in here, and I just thought about it, is like a little half of an apricot, because apricot really and almonds go great together. Once these are baked, boy, you could dip these in chocolate. If you notice, and I'm going to show you here in a minute, I put a little thumbprint in it. If you made these cookies a little bit bigger, you could put that thumbprint in, and then you could fill it when they're baked with fresh fruit, berries, and some sort of cream for it, something like that. So, all right. Juliana, help me out.
Sure.
What else?
While he's rolling, I'm going to address that there is a misconception about a diabetes diagnosis that means no more carbs, right? You hear diabetes and you think, okay, I can't have carbs anymore. And that's really not the truth. The reality is we need carbs. They're our body and our brain's main source of energy. The fiber in them is essential for gut health. It's so important for our digestion, and it plays a role in regulating cholesterol and blood sugar levels. So, you might be surprised that we chose a cookie recipe for today for our diabetes class, but the point of this is to demonstrate that you can incorporate your favorite foods into an eating plan for diabetes. You just have to be smart about it. For example, today we're using a low-carb flour for the cookie. We're also using less sugar than normally would be in a cookie dough recipe. And then some things to keep in mind too is pairing foods. We don't want to ever just eat a carbohydrate food on its own necessarily, because that could spike our blood sugar. Things like fiber, things like fat and protein all help to slow down the absorption of sugar into our bloodstream, and they can keep us from having a blood sugar spike really fast. So those are some things to consider. For example, when you're having a snack at home, maybe you wanted a piece of fruit. How about do an apple with peanut butter? Or instead of a bag of chips, maybe some cheese and crackers. It's all about that balance, and that's what we're here to show to you today. Balance is the key.
All right, so back to it. Here's what I'm going to do. If you bake them like this, these aren't like regular cookies where they would, spread out. You got to kind of work with them to get them spread out a little bit. So what I'm going to do, and I think we've all made some sort of thumbprint cookie, I think they're called for Christmas or something like that. Basically, just want to stick my thumb in this and just push it down a little bit of water, help it keep from sticking. But this is really going to help the baking process because these don't spread, like I said. So if we just left them in the balls, it would take longer to cook and then they would eventually dry out. So we kind of want to add a little dimple to it here. And again, you could make these even bigger and make a bigger hole with a spoon or something, and then serve this as a dessert, fill it with berries, like I said before, or some other type of fruit. At this point, you could hit them with some sprinkles, something like that. Those apricots, different thing. Dates would be great. Don't add the chocolate now. We'll add that later. We're going to put this in a 360-degree oven for about 12 minutes. All right, and at the end, this is what they kind of look like. We have some muffins that we made earlier, but the cookies are really what we're looking at here. And the cookies are moist in the middle. They're soft. They're chewy. Like I said, dip them in chocolate. This would be, the other thing about these, they last a long time, right? Yeah. They don't get stale as quick as other cookies. So obviously you want to wrap them up when you're done, but they're going to last 3 or 4 days, no problem. So very moist and delicious. So I hope you try it. We can start on the next recipe if you like.
Sounds good.
Sure. Welcome back. So next recipe we're going to make is a spaghetti squash alla pomodoro. Juliana, can you tell us a little bit about this recipe and how it's healthier than something else?
Yeah, well, so we're making this spaghetti squash alla pomodoro, and you could pretty much have it as a side dish, I think, because it's not quite as filling as a main dish, or you're welcome to use something like a whole wheat pasta for it as well to go with the sauce, or even put maybe a roll with it on the side. There's so many things that you can do with it, but know that if you have diabetes, this is a very low carb meal. So you're gonna wanna have some type of carb with it. So when you're making it at home, keep that in mind. But this is a really great pasta sauce that's fresh, and it's from scratch, but it's relatively easy. I know personally, I don't always think scratch easy, but this one is pretty amazing, and Chef Tony's gonna show you just how easy it is.
Yeah. So I took some Roma tomatoes. I boiled them in water for about 22 seconds. I plunged them into cold ice water. I peeled them and I took the seeds and the juice out. And what I have is just a great, nice diced tomato. I love Roma tomatoes before this because they have a nice, juicy, thick wall, and they hold up really well. This sauce isn't really like a traditional tomato sauce. It's more like sautéed tomatoes, with some garlic. But it is going to have a little bit of sauciness to it. So I have a pan going on here. First, I want to let you know is I took a spaghetti squash. Everybody knows what spaghetti squash is. It's a squash that when you eat it, it has little spaghetti strands. So I guess people think they got to serve it with some sort of tomato sauce, but it works pretty well with that. What I did is I cut it, I cleaned it, washed it, cut it in half, put it on the cut side down, put it on a baking sheet, baked it in the oven for about 40 minutes. That was it. I pulled it out, I quartered it so it gives them these nice little boat effect. And we're going to top it with this sauce and a little bit of Parmesan cheese, and it's going to be awesome. We're going to bake it in the oven. Okay? So that's what I did first. Next, once I have that going, you could do this hours in advance. You could do this the day before, not a big deal. You could even make the sauce the day before, but we're going to make it here right now. Very little fat in this recipe, so we need a little bit. So I'm going to add a little bit more olive oil than we typically would add, probably 3 or 4 tablespoons, maybe a quarter cup. I took some garlic, and I don't know, I've been on this pureed garlic kick for a while. You can chop it, you can dice it, you can smash it, you can put salt on it and rub it with a knife. I took a little bit of olive oil and some parsley, and I just whizzed it up in a whizzer, and I got this kind of paste, right? The only thing I'll say is when you have hot oil ready to go and garlic, if it's too hot, it's going to burn. Always have something around like a bottle of wine, and it does call for wine in this recipe. And all the alcohol's cooked out. We're going to reduce it and do things like that. But if I add the garlic in there and we say, oh my gosh, it's too hot, we hit it with a little wine, it stops the cooking real quick. And I can tell you right now, this is a little too hot.
I always burn my garlic.
You always burn it?
Every time.
Okay. Well, it's always good to have some, even if it's just water. The tomatoes would work well as well.
That's a good
So we're
tip.
going to add a little bit in there. All right, we're going to add, I can see it starting to brown up. We're going to add our tomatoes. And that's what you're kind of looking for. You want it hot, right? You ask yourself, well, why do the restaurants taste so good? Because they got flames like this. That's what they're doing. They're really cooking here. What happens is when I put the tomatoes in that hot juice or that hot pan, the moisture in the tomatoes are going to come out, and you can see just a little bit of moisture coming out, but as it's being released, it's immediately evaporating and concentrating the flavors. We really want to concentrate the flavors. This is a mild dish. It's all vegetables. There's no protein. There's no meat. So we want to concentrate and make these flavors pop, right? And how do we do that? We do that by reducing whatever liquid is in here. So that tomato juice is really going to reduce, give it a lot of flavor. Okay. We want to add just a little bit of black pepper and some salt. Tomatoes love salt. Okay. Next, okay, we're going to add this is pretty much done. We're going to add a little bit of white wine. I can see the juices coming out. I got this on high. I'm going to add just a tinge of white wine, and we're going to start reducing that. Again, reduce the tomato juices, reduce the white wine. Again, concentrating flavor, okay? Now, this is going to taste a little winey right now, so that's why we want to reduce it. We do want that wine flavor, but we don't want that raw wine flavor, okay? So I'm going to taste this real quick. And it's just a little too watery for me. Amazing, though. As that's cooking down, we're going to take a little bit of fresh basil. And I'm just going to do a little, what we call chiffonade or ribbon cut. We're going to put a little bit on top, but we're going to put a little bit into the sauce right now. whenever you're cutting, you always want to hold your fingers and have the knife slide against the tops of your fingers. Never put your fingers out like that because you're going to get cut. Okay, I'm looking at it. It looks like it's reducing. I'm going to add a good amount of basil. That's going to just infuse all that basil flavor into the tomato sauce. Let that go. Now, I have an oven on. I got something else in the oven, so let me take it out. Okay, here we go. So I got my oven cranked up. What I like to do now is add a little bit of fresh tomato right at the end. What's that going to do? That's going to kind of stop the cooking a little bit. I crank it off. And now I got all these cooked tomatoes, but I have some nice freshness too. You can see I didn't cook the basil to death. All right, here we go. We get
Smells
this on.
amazing.
Yeah, I mean tomatoes and garlic. Come on. So let's take this. I did season the inside of these spaghetti squashes earlier, just with a little salt and pepper. Top each one.
Yum.
I want to use all this. It's okay if it falls over the edges. Remember, the spaghetti squash is already cooked. So we're going to throw this under the broiler to get it nice and brown. You could add, I mean, if you want to go for it and add a little bit more fat, you could add different types of cheeses. Ricotta cheese would be great on there. Mozzarella cheese would be great, fresh mozzarella. But I'm just going to add some Parmesan cheese. And that's really going to get all nice and crusty in the under the broiler. All right. We're going to put this under the broiler and let it go.
Yum. Like I said earlier, it's really not about cutting out carbs completely. It's more about what kind of carbs we're choosing, when and how much. So let's talk a little bit about timing. It's absolutely true that carbs are going to raise our blood sugar. So that's why it's essential not to overdo it at one sitting. It's better to eat small amounts consistently throughout the day to keep our blood sugars stable. You know, if we skip breakfast, for example, and then overeat later, that could create some low lows and some high highs, which is what we'd like to avoid if possible. So working closely with a registered dietitian can be really, really helpful in creating a plan that's personalized for you, your lifestyle, and your medications. So I would recommend that. They can help you get a better idea of how much carbohydrate to include at each meal and at each snack. Another thing that's important is the type of carbohydrate. So simple sugars like the ones in pop and the ones in candy, they're refined. So like I mentioned earlier about how they're absorbed into the bloodstream really quickly, and they can spike our blood sugar. When we choose carbohydrates that are complex and have more fiber, that keeps our blood sugar from spiking quite as quickly. So that's something to keep in mind. 100% whole grain options are definitely things to include in your meal plan. Like I said, you could include a roll, you could do it with a whole wheat pasta, maybe throw some chicken or something. You could do so much with this, but make sure, simple rule when you're making a meal, does it have some fat? Does it have some protein? Does it have some carbs? That's essential.
The other thing, we're using spaghetti squash here today, but you could use zucchini, core out the zucchini and do it. Yellow squash, eggplant would be amazing. You could use another type of acorn squash or butternut squash. You know how the butternut has that long head and then it's kind of bulbous at the bottom. You could cut that. It's always hard to peel that, but you cut that end off, open it up, core it out, roast it just like we did the spaghetti squash, top it in that little natural cup. You could do this with anything. You could put this over rice. You could saute some chicken breasts. I think we did a recipe last week where I pounded some chicken breasts, sauteed them, and I put this on top, and it was awesome. So, that's just a good technique to learn of using those tomatoes. Could you use canned tomatoes? Sure, you could use canned tomatoes.
Yeah.
Oh my.
really just getting in the kitchen is the first step.
Yeah.
You know, whatever you might have, whether it's diabetes, heart disease, anything, getting in the kitchen, getting your hands dirty, making your own food is just an awesome step in the right direction.
Now, look, this is done. Obviously, you might not eat 2 of these, but you may. You could also cut these smaller and do them in like individuals and have them for, you know, obviously you don't want this big one if you're doing a big party, but you could do smaller ones. But that's the dish right there. Spaghetti squash alla pomodoro. Hope you try that at home.